At first glance, this just looks like a video of a traffic jam. Nothing out of the ordinary. But what you're seeing here is the physical manifestation of one of the most devastating blows ever dealt to Russia. Are you seeing the situation at the border between Kazakhstan and Russia? Now, in October 2025, there are confirmed reports of lines with more than 5,000 trucks. Can you imagine that? And these aren't just any trucks. Each one is carrying technology from China. Microchips, electronic components, drones. Exactly what keeps the Russian tank and missile factories running. But here's the question that no one is asking. If Russia desperately needs this and China is sending it, why the hell is everything at a standstill? The answer will surprise you. Watch. This crisis, actually, didn't start now. It began a few weeks ago in mid-September 2025. And time keeps passing. But something here is even more impressive. This block didn't happen by mere chance. It was actually executed with surgical precision. That's because customs officers from both countries are inspecting 99% of the trucks suspected of carrying sensitive products. And for certain items like microchips and machinery, the rejection rate is 100%. Absolutely everything is being blocked. Even regular shipments with no restrictions are taking 3 to 5 days to cross a border that should only take hours. But after all, why is this happening now? And this is where the story starts to get intriguing. In the midst of this chaos, 3 different versions started circulating, each one blaming the other. The official version from Kazakhstan says the following: it's Russia's fault. According to them, the Russians are re-inspecting cargo that has already been cleared by Kazakh customs. This would be creating the bottleneck on the Russian side of the border. Amid Russian paranoia, Kazakhstan would become the victim. But the Russians tell a completely different story. At first, the Kremlin denied everything. They said there were no barriers. The problem was private companies that didn't give proper instructions to the drivers. But when the situation got worse, they changed the narrative. Now, they said it was Kazakhstan's fault, claiming they were doing extra inspections. However, there's a third layer to this story, one that most people ignore. In January 2025, Russia implemented a new border rule. Foreign drivers, including Kazakhs, can only stay 90 days per year on Russian territory. But there's a problem. The time you spend waiting in line counts toward those 90 days. Think about that. Border inspections leave you stuck for weeks, and all that time is being deducted from your annual limit. The result? Thousands of Kazakh drivers are now technically breaking Russian law and are now vulnerable to heavy fines and even imprisonment. A member of the Kazakh parliament warned that tens of thousands of drivers and transport companies are now under threat. Many believe this was intentional. An attempt by Russia to push Kazakhs out of the transport market in favor of Russian and Belarusian companies. But then, which of these versions is true? Well, the truth is that all these narratives are part of a much more sophisticated game. Kazakhstan is practicing something we can call malicious obedience. Here's how it works. The United States has pressured Central Asian countries for months. The message is clear. Do not allow your territories to be used to circumvent sanctions against Russia. And the threat behind this message is even clearer. The infamous secondary sanctions. So, if you want to help, Russia will lose its access to the dollar financial system. For Kazakhstan, which is trying to balance its relations between the West and Russia, this pressure has become impossible to ignore. But openly challenging Russia would be too risky. And that's when Russia made a serious mistake. In its paranoia about smuggling and illegal imports, the Kremlin decided to drastically increase inspections at its own border. That's when Kazakhstan saw the perfect opportunity. They decided to step up their own inspections, claiming they were just making sure shipments were compliant on the Russian side, avoiding even bigger delays. Sounds like cooperation, right? Actually, it's sabotage in disguise. The result was devastating. Intense inspections on both sides of the border caused a total blockade. And Kazakhstan can tell the world with a straight face that it's just following Russia's own rules. In other words, Putin dug the hole, and Kazakhstan went there and pushed him in. And do you know why this matters so much? After all, what are these trucks carrying that's so important? To understand, we need to go back to 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine. At the time, the West responded with unprecedented sanctions. Europe, the United States, Japan all cut off Russia's access to advanced technology. Critical components, industrial machinery, sophisticated electronics, everything was blocked. Without these products, the Russian defense industry can't produce modern weapons. Without Western microchips, you can't make missiles, you can't repair advanced tanks, you can't produce drones. The Kremlin's response was to create a massive sanctions evasion system. Russia. They called it parallel imports. Basically, they legalized smuggling on a national scale. They published lists of products and brands that could be imported without the permission of the patent owners. And that's where China comes in. It became a key player in this operation, and the main route of this scheme spanned thousands of kilometers. From Chinese factories, through Kazakhstan, straight to Russia, day and night, trucks transport the lifeblood of the Russian war machine. These are products like microchips, optical sensors, drone parts, specialized tools, and advanced electronic components. This was the dirty secret that kept Putin's factories running. But, as you just saw, in October 2025, that lifeline was cut. Now, let me show you something that's happening thousands of kilometers to the east. In Nizhny Tagil, beyond the Ural Mountains, there is Uralvagonzavod, the largest tank factory in Russia. On the factory's massive assembly line, dozens of nearly completed new T-90M tank hulls. They are standing still, silently waiting for their electronic brains. I'm talking about the advanced fire control systems, which rely exactly on those chips that are now stuck at the border. KZAKH. Without these critical components, the tanks are nothing more than useless piles of metal. The factory manager calls frantically to the Ministry of Defense in Moscow, and to suppliers, the answer is always the same. The shipment is stuck at the Kazakh border. We don't know when it will arrive. The production line stops. Thousands of workers are laid off without pay or assigned to meaningless tasks like cleaning the factory yard. And this isn't fiction. Independent analyses from 2025 confirm that production of the T-90M, Russia's most advanced tank, has plummeted. But there's more. Uralvagonzavod wasn't actually building brand new tanks from scratch. They were upgrading old T-90A models, and now the stock of those old models has run out. The factory started pulling obsolete T-70 and 2A tanks from the 1980s out of deep storage. They're literally scraping the bottom of the barrel. Analysts project that all restorable stocks of Soviet armored vehicles could be depleted by the end of 2025 or in 2026. And to make Russia's situation worse, its defense industry isn't growing. It's basically cannibalizing its Soviet past, and the blockade at the Kazakh border is accelerating this collapse. These effects are also reaching the front. Imagine an armored brigade at the front in Donetsk. It lost half its tanks during the fierce summer attacks. For months, it has been waiting for the promised reinforcements, the new and formidable T-90M tanks that were supposed to come from Moscow. But those tanks remain stuck in a factory in the Urals, reduced to piles of metal because of a single microchip. Without reinforcements, this brigade becomes increasingly vulnerable against Ukraine's modern Western tanks and sophisticated anti-tank missile systems. The heavy losses this brigade will suffer in the upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive and its eventual forced withdrawal will not be the result of a tactical mistake. The ultimate cause will be bureaucratic paralysis at a customs post thousands of kilometers away. And this isn't just the story of a chip or a factory. It's the reality throughout the entire Russian defense industry. There are hundreds of different critical components: precision machine tools, special alloys, optical sensors, communication modules. Every part that keeps the Russian war machine running in the 21st century depends on this bet on parallel imports, and this bet is being lost. Every truck stopped at the border slows down a production line. Every production line that slows down means a different unit at the front is left without equipment. And each unit without equipment brings Russia one step closer to defeat. And this reveals the genius behind the West's strategy. Why isn't the goal to bring down Russia all at once? The goal is like an anaconda that slowly squeezes its prey. Each sanction, each diplomatic move, slows the flow of blood in the veins of the Russian economy and war machine. This chaos happening on the Kazakh border is one of the most successful and destructive moves of this strangulation operation. And that brings us to the big question: why did Kazakhstan do this? For years, Kazakhstan has navigated its delicate position through a balanced foreign policy. It maintained balanced relations with all the major powers, Russia, China, and the West. In this way, it maximized its sovereignty and economic opportunities. Although Kazakhstan remains a formal ally of Russia, its actions since 2022 demonstrate a clear divergence. That's because they maintained neutrality regarding the war in Ukraine and refused to recognize Russia's annexation of Ukrainian territories. And they have been working to deepen ties with China, Turkey, and the European Union. The border blockade is the boldest decision Kazakhstan has ever made. By closing this route for sanctioned goods to Russia, the country made a clear choice. Protecting its own economy and maintaining good relations with the West is worth more than its obligations to the Russians. Now, do you remember that I mentioned China at the beginning? This border crisis is exposing the truth about the so-called unlimited friendship between Putin and Xi Jinping. Yes, China supports Russia economically and diplomatically, but this partnership is not based on ideology or loyalty. It's based on self-interest. Point E. From China's point of view, this mess at the border is a pretty expensive disaster. Let me explain. China has a mega project called the Belt and Road Initiative. It's basically a plan to create land trade routes connecting China to Europe, a new modern Silk Road. And one of the main routes of this project goes through. Do you know where? Kazakhstan and Russia? So, what was supposed to be a commercial highway flowing non-stop turned into a giant parking lot. And all of this because of paranoia. Each truck stopped there means losses for Chinese companies. It means delays. It means that China's major strategic project is stuck. And there's more. China is now seeing that relying on Russia for transportation is a serious problem, so it's looking for alternatives. One of them is the Middle Corridor, a route that goes through Central Asia, crosses the Caspian Sea, passes through Azerbaijan, and reaches Turkey. And it does this completely outside of Russian control. The conclusion here is simple. Russia has proven to be an unreliable partner for China, and this is pushing the Chinese to create routes that don't depend on it. The result? Russia becomes increasingly isolated and less important to its biggest ally. As you can see, Russia finds itself in a perfect trap. Kazakhstan is blocking from the outside, and Russia's own actions are sabotaging from within. And in this game, Russia isn't losing to Ukraine or to NATO. In fact, it has become a victim of its own paranoia and incompetence. Kazakhstan simply took advantage of this opportunity, turning the Kremlin's mistake into a brutal trap. While you're watching this video, more and more trucks have joined that endless line at the border. More production lines have stopped, more brigades at the front have been left without equipment, and the anaconda keeps squeezing. Now tell me something. In your opinion, will Russia be able to get out of this dead end? Share your thoughts below. And if you found this content relevant, share it with someone who needs to understand what's happening behind the scenes of global geopolitics. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next analyses. See you next time.